So welcome everyone. Today we have Georgia Marrion here again, and we are diving into the topic of hormones. And I guess this is a really big topic during pregnancy, during postpartum, because at any stage or many stages, we all come a little bit hormotional, which is not actually a word, but I think we're all familiar with it. And we're just going to talk about, well, Georgia's going to dive into how stress, sleep, and even down to the point of too much cardio can actually, play with your hormones and even affect fat loss, and the importance of blood sugar levels, not only during pregnancy, but postpartum and throughout motherhood, and particularly as we journey towards menopause, and how this can all sort of influence basically your general well-being. So, Georgia, welcome.
Thank you. Nice to be back.
Good to have you again. And let's just start discussing the challenges that many women face, which is the whole I'm tired, but I'm feeling really wired.
Yes. So common. And so I guess to clear what that actually looks like. So wired but tired is really where they have significant and sustained fatigue and it feels like it's going all the time. They can't relax or calm down or unwind. It's, I guess, the image I have in my head of like a coiled wire, that just stays coiled, if you like.
Or often happens when, like, I know for many women when they're trying to fall asleep and you think, I'm really tired, I just need to go to bed, and then it's just,
well, that's it. And that can be part of the presentation as well, as when they have difficulty falling asleep, especially if it's after 10 p.m, because they feel like they get a second wind, which is all part of this sort of presentation, and then they don't feel particularly rested, even though they've had enough hours of sleep at night, and they find it really hard to get out of bed in the morning. And so they need, stimulants like caffeine and energy drinks, but they don't feel like they have as much of an energy boosting effect compared to in the past. So I guess that's the common kind of presentation as well. So I'll just turn my phone off. But also things that they don't often associate with this whole thing are things like muscle and joint pain and menstrual irregularities and libido, low libido, weight gain, especially around the middle, with having difficulty losing it or gaining it easily, or usually a bit of both, brain fog and difficulty concentrating, and mood changes like irritability, skin problems and gut problems, and the list goes on, and sugar cravings, right? So, which is all sounding really common. So what happens is that basically your adrenal glands, and they sit on top of your kidneys, the short version is they're not functioning as well as they could be. And that's what's underlying all of this, right? Because if you think about your acute stress responses, where your body produces adrenaline and cortisol, which are your stress hormones essentially, and they help your body get out of the perceived danger. And it does this by increasing your heart rate and increasing your blood glucose levels. And this all happens really quickly, as well as your alertness, to give your body the energy and the tools it needs to be able to move quickly. So for example, when there is actually acute real danger, like you're driving along and someone runs out in front of you, right? You want those sort of biological responses so you can move and you can act really quickly. But the problem is when this occurs chronically, and this is what's underlying a lot of this, right? So this is what happens when, in the initial stages, at least, excessive cortisol, the stress hormone we spoke about, is produced, because it's produced because the body is trying to handle this stress. And it's a bit like the brain is yelling at the adrenal glands, if you like, to produce more. And like anyone who gets yelled at, the response is generally to just move quicker to get things done. So that can be a little bit what happens. So your adrenal glands are, in the initial phases, producing more and more cortisol, but of course that's not sustainable. So excessive levels over a period of time, they're not very helpful for your body by nature of what cortisol does, like we spoke about, helpful for acute response, not helpful when they're chronically elevated. So over time, what underlies all of this is basically this HPA axis dysfunction, which is also known as, I guess, adrenal fatigue, is an unofficial term for it. And this comes about because a lot of women, like you mentioned before, the rushing women, which is, I guess, a common term at the moment, but basically where they're living a high stress, busy lifestyle over a long period of time. So another analogy I like to use here is where it's like driving your car really fast for really long distances, and you can do it and the car will keep going, it'll keep driving up to a point, but there will be a cost to the car of running that for too long. And so it's the same with your body, really. So.
And it's also, I mean, I guess what's so challenging for so many women is you, post-pregnancy, is you are in this high alert. Like you know, this is why you become high alert. You always hear your baby cry.
Yes.
And I mean, by a third pregnancy, I took in earplugs and an eye mask into hospital because I was like, I don't care. I know I'm going to hear this baby cry regardless. So, and I want to get as much rest as possible before I go home to 2 other children. So I guess that's where it's really, as you say, looking at the car you drive and how you service it, and just being aware that, I mean, I say for a lot of my postpartum clients, you know, even if you can't have a rest and literally go to sleep, just closing your eyes for 10 minutes and, you know, dropping down into, if you can, that parasympathetic nervous system makes a massive difference, because it takes you out of that flight or fight response, doesn't it?
That's it. And so this is the thing, is that the biochemical, I guess, response to this is that the body doesn't know the difference between what is an actual and what is a perceived stress, and whether it's physical or psychological, you know, the hormonal response is the same. And, you know, so things that are driving this for women is this busyness, which is this ongoing, and a lot of this is driven by our own thought processes, that there isn't enough time to get everything done, or there's too much on their list, or they're not wanting to let people down, or not being good enough. So, you know, there's a sense of urgency of constantly doing and busyness, if you like. So that's a lot of it as well. They can also be driven by emotional stress, so, you know, which is common, especially like you said in the postpartum sort of phase, when there's a lot going on. You've got physical stress because you're not getting enough sleep. You've got emotional stress because, you know, you're looking after a person.
Yeah, oh, completely. And just that whole extra sense of responsibility. And if, you know, if I don't respond to my baby while it's crying, you know, you get into this whole pattern of, oh, I'm not a good mother, and whatever, and I'm not, and it's a really difficult to navigate. But I guess
because then you're in sleep deprivation and nutrient deficiencies and inadequate food intake, like overall calories, like if you're skipping meals because you just got so much during the day that you're managing, and you're juggling all of this and other things, and it's like medications as well, like the oral contraceptive pill can disrupt this axis, right? And so this comes, like we said, at a bit of a cost, and so there can be biochemical imbalances to this, which is where your HPA axis, which is when we talk about that, which is your hypothalamus and your pituitary in your brain, and that works with your adrenal glands to help you respond to stress, which is what you were talking about before with your sympathetic nervous system response. And what's really common when people are presenting like this is this sympathetic nervous system dominance. I know you talk a lot about that a lot, which is essentially your fight or flight response, which is really helpful when you're wanting to get car so you don't run someone over. But the problem is when that is where you're operating most of the time, rather than a balance of that and your parasympathetic nervous system area, which is more your rest, digest, restore and reduce part of it.
So when we are in this flight or fight response and operating at this level, is that where the body is burning more glucose rather than fat?
Yes, so that can be part of it, because part of the, we mentioned before, to do with one of the responses when there is a real or perceived danger, is that, your cortisol levels go up. And so one of the responses to that is to release a whole lot of glucose into your system. So you can say run from that line really fast, or you can stop that car really quickly. So you can imagine that when this is going on and on and on, you can see how that can then contribute to, you're running more on glucose and not necessarily on other fuels as well. That can be the case. And then you can add in other factors as well, which we'll talk about, like exercise, and you can see how there's a perfect storm there. So
so that's a good lead in, because I guess two questions is, like, first of all, is when you're in this fight or flight response, and yes, your body's responding more and using more glucose, and you're not tapping into those fat stores, are you actually laying down more fat?
So it's a bit of a combination, if you like, because So I guess broadly speaking, if females have excessive belly fat, one of the causes can be stress. Not the only cause, but it definitely can be a significant cause, because your body is storing extra fat, which sounds counterintuitive, but as a protective mechanism. Because in the past, your body is associating chronic stress with food scarcity, if you like. So cortisol is communicating with all the cells in the body, saying store fat just as a safety, just saying, no, we've got enough to get us through this war, this famine, whatever it might be. And also when we're stressed, we're often eating more high energy foods, so, and you've also got to remember like we mentioned, the effect of cortisol on your blood sugar levels. And so that can, when our blood sugar levels are elevated for an extended period of time, that can contribute to insulin resistance, which is where your tummy fat can come from as well. So insulin is your hormone that helps get your glucose into your cells. So it can throw this whole balance out as well. So it's a combination of those factors. And then if you add in excessive exercise, and particularly if you're a woman in your, any female, but particularly if you say late 30s and beyond, and you're exercising fasted without fueling beforehand in an appropriate way, that can also exacerbate this, this cortisol response, because exercise obviously increases your cortisol response. If you're fueling correctly, and obviously your stress levels are generally under control, well, then that's kind of mediated and it's still a healthy response. But when you've got those other factors going on, like we've spoken about, like excessive stress and busyness and all that kind of thing, and then add in not eating enough overall, not eating enough protein, and not eating enough before and after you've trained, for example, especially if you're doing quite intense sessions, as you would be able to say, and that's where it can further contribute to, belly fat and overall body fat. Well, women are thinking, oh gosh, I'm doing so much exercise, but I'm not losing weight. And that can be a big part of life. We see it all the time. So
I get this question, I'd say at least once a week. And I just actually talked about it in the BFAB method, because one of the ladies in the online program said, should I be doing cardio? What should I be doing for cardio? Which, is twofold, because it's unfortunately been programmed by the fitness industry that you need to do cardio to get any results. And then, there's this busyness in women's life where they think, okay, I'm not doing enough. When I come to exercise, if I'm not, red-faced and sweating and I've raised my heart rate and done cardio, and then they get in this cycle where that's all they do is cardio, and then they come to me and say, nothing's changed. Why am I not losing weight? Why is my body not changing? Why is my energy so low? I'm exercising more, I'm doing this, and I'm eating less carbs, I'm not eating as much, and it becomes this terrible, vicious cycle, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. I mean, but the good thing is that a lot of it can be addressed and balanced out, and it's a lot to do with knowledge. And like you said, you're right. And I guess I've fallen into that trap in the past as well. Is like, where you sort of think we've always been educated that you just need to do lots of cardio. And
completely. I was the same. I used to teach fitness classes and then think I hadn't done enough, and I'd go on the treadmill for half an hour and run, and then wonder why I couldn't get out of bed on a Sunday. So depleted. And yes, and my body shape was worse. I would be clinging. I look back at photos and I can see in those photos, oh my gosh, my body was definitely clinging to everything that I put into it. And I was craving sugar, I couldn't just stop at one piece of chocolate. It was just this really, really overpowering cravings. It was pretty out of whack. Yeah,
that's right, exactly. So it's when you look at it like that, it makes sense, because the body is very wise. And it can be frustrating when you're looking in the mirror going, I've got so much belly fat, but there's, when you're looking at the reasons behind that, it makes sense.
It does. And it's I guess it's twofold. It's like, you don't, cardio is great. It's also everything's got to be in balance.
Yeah.
And also, on another topic is a lot of women think, oh, then I've just got to go and spot train my core, my belly, and I've got to do planks and sit-ups, and then, that's a whole other conversation about damage to the core and pelvic floor. But so what do you think? What are the best steps that women take, first of all, to kind of drop down out of this high cortisol level? Do they start with nutrition, or do they start with looking at how their day is, or what do you think are the first things?
I think it needs to be Sorry.
That's all right.
A combination of factors. I mean, I think, so you can be eating the best diet in the world, and obviously that is very important when you're supporting your nervous system and your adrenal glands. But if you're not also addressing what's driving your stress and your thought processes in relation to that, well, then it's only going to be so effective. So, you know, in terms of the nutritional approach, I've been making sure that women are having enough of all the macronutrients, so proteins, carbohydrates, and fats. And obviously the particular ratio will be different for women depending on their own situation and where they're at, and if they're just postpartum or if they're further along, and all different types of factors. But focusing on making sure you're having all the macronutrients and eating, like we've spoken about a lot before, quality versions of those, and focusing on a nutrient-rich diet rather than an energy-dense diet, you know, if you like. So, and you're wanting to be making sure you're having enough calories overall. So a lot of the nutrients, both macro and micronutrients, are needed to help your nervous system and adrenal glands function properly. And particularly if you had to highlight one nutrient, I mean, it's hard to tease them all out because they do all contribute, but having protein with each snack and each meal is really important, partly because it helps with that helping people feel full, but also it helps with helping balance out your blood sugar levels, which is really important. A lot of stuff.
So it puts a bit of a lid on that spike, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does, which is really important when someone is presenting with this kind of thing, where there's cortisol, where there's HPA dysfunction, or it's out of balance. Addressing blood sugar levels is a really significant part of it. You know, minimizing intake of substances that don't support your adrenal glands and your nervous system. So sugar, as like we mentioned, is a really big one, because stable blood sugar is really important for having a stable HPA access, you know, as well as things that stress to your body. So stimulants and preservatives and chemicals, and for certain people, certain so food intolerances or allergies, that type of thing, looking at that. Eating regularly, and this is a big thing for women, especially when they're in the postpartum period and they're like, okay, right, I'm going to get my body back, so to speak, and then so they'll start skipping meals, that sort of thing. Not skipping meals because it's being counterproductive. It's not going to help you lose weight. You're just going to make sure you're eating enough of the right things, because what happens is it causes your adrenal glands to release cortisol to help maintain your blood sugar levels, because you're not eating enough, among other things. You know, eating with your body rhythm, and this will be slightly different for everyone, but, you know, focusing on eating, you know, say more of your larger meals at the beginning and the middle part of the day, and less as the day goes on, you know, not eating too late into the evening closer to bed. So you probably, again, everyone will be quite different, but, you know, generally speaking, focusing on 3 meals and 2 snacks to supporting this kind of process. And then key nutrients to really look at beyond that is, you know, magnesium, zinc, and things like your B vitamins and C and E, really, I guess, would be the main points I'd be thinking about. And then beyond that, very much also looking at, okay, what's your mind thoughts? How much of this is coming from your head in terms of what the expectations you have for yourself, and how much of this stress do you create yourself? And for that you don't create, how are you responding to it, and how can you manage it? Because stress is unavoidable, but how we're responding to it, especially as women, is a significant part of how our body can respond to it in a healthy way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, so many good points. And Georgia's done all the nutrition program inside the BFAB method, and one thing that is fantastic about it is, regardless if you're pregnant or postpartum, is she's got a lot of nutrient dense snacking ideas. So it's really just, as she said, you know, it doesn't necessarily have to be a meal, and we've got a whole snack guide in there, but it's like, particularly when you're full during pregnancy and you can't fit much in, but also when you're short on time postpartum, it's not about, okay, I'm just going to start skipping meals. It's about, you know, what's going to be quality food that, you know, is going to help stop me get out of this flight response where my cortisol is going to be raised. I'm going to start clinging to fat, and just eating these nutrient dense meals or smaller meals and snacks, and eating them regularly. And also, yeah, it's so important is this mindset. And I mean, I'm always talking about this to my one-on-one clients and also to the members. You know, it's not just about the quantity of exercise you do, it's the quality. And, you know, just slowing down and connecting to your body and looking at how your day is. So I like to say, you know, if you've had, it's a 24/7 day as a mum, and if you've been up all night on 3 hours sleep, you don't want to go and do a more depleting workout. Like, it's almost like I say, break it into a HIIT. Your whole day is like a HIIT class, so high intensity interval training. And you need intervals. Those workouts only work if you have an interval of rest.
Yes.
So if you've had zero rest, you know, at night, you're not going to go and do, you know, a big interval during the day with minimal rest. You need to kind of create these pockets of rest, and whether that be how you go about your day, how you kind of find something to bring you down, whether that be you know, just simple breathing exercises, meditation, or just gentle stretching on the mat, anything to stop you tuning out. And it's really hard these days to try and tune out because we all start scrolling. And I know I sense, because I'm quite adrenal sensitive, I sense my adrenals, like I start ramping up when I get into this scrolling mode on the phone. And I also am quite sensitive, you know, to coffee. So if I have coffee, I rarely have it, but if I definitely have it any later than 10 o'clock, it kicks in for me at night, particularly if I've exercised. When I teach exercise classes at night, I come home and I'm like, I want to vacuum and clean the whole house.
Everyone's
like, everyone's like, what's going on? But yeah, and as you say, it's really, I think, tuning into your own, as you say, your own biorhythms, or what that is, and what, I guess, how you respond to it, how you respond.
Yeah, I was like, the physical side, it doesn't have to be, it doesn't, I mean, not to say it's easy, especially as women, but it doesn't have to be hard. It can start with 3 minutes a day of meditation.
Completely.
Starting that as a habit, like, and as far as, or even just taking 10 breaths a day and just starting something really small. It doesn't have to be, all right, I'm going to go sit on a mountain and be there for 3 hours, you know, which is not terribly practical for really any of us.
I know. Well, I tell you, my favorite place to meditate is actually, I get to school pick up early. I sit in the car, I put on a 5-minute meditation, I put my sunnies on, and you know, I may not be totally zoned out, but I definitely makes me just
relative, right? And it
stop. It makes me just, I have to stop. I'm sitting there, and it's like, okay, rather than jumping on the phone, I'm just going to stop and breathe for 5 minutes.
And it's also that thing, like it's a process as well, because if you're operating up here in your adrenal glands and it's all this, you're not going to go from here to here. Like, to start with being maybe there. Start with that. And if doing a little bit of breathing helps you get there and that becomes your normal, well, then do that. And then a little bit lower sort of thing. It's like small, as we talk about a lot, small sustainable changes rather than, all right, I'm just going to change everything all at once sort of thing. So
completely. And there's little tips, like, I don't know if I did a video on this about positioning your body to help you tap into your vagus nerve, you know, the nerve that runs down and hits your digestion. And when it's simply, I mean, I'll post it below this. It's simply just, you know, even when you sit on the couch, which a lot of pregnant women do anyway, and elevate their legs and put a pillow underneath your knees and sort of upright behind your back, and you do start to hear your tummy gurgling, because it's this kind of dropping down into that more parasympathetic, and you know, just kind of getting in a position that gives you more of a relaxed state, which I know is hard when you've got children crawling all over you and babies that you have to tend to. But even if it's just for 5 minutes, you know, it does definitely make a difference. And then those increments can slowly, if they can, become a little bit longer.
Yeah, like anything, consistency is the key though, and it's making the decision to start it or to try it without being in a way initially that causes more stress, like another thing on your to-do list. You know, most people don't fall asleep straight away before they go to bed, so doing 3 minutes before bed is achievable for pretty much everybody. It's just a decision to do so.
And what are your thoughts on the quality of sleep? So back to the quality and quantity of exercise. Do you think that it's not just, you know, some women will get 8 hours worth of sleep, but it's completely broken, or 5 hours worth of a deep sleep? Do you think that's better on the nervous system and the adrenals?
I think I mean, everyone is different, but I think generally speaking, for a stable HPA axis and cortisol sort of cortisol health, I'd be really looking at least 7 hours sleep a night. And obviously that's not always possible with young children, that sort of thing. I guess that's kind of what you're aiming at, but you know, going to bed earlier rather than later, especially because when there is cortisol imbalances and there's this HPA axis dysfunction, what can happen is, particularly when cortisol's in the elevated phase, because what can happen over a period of time is it's elevated and then it goes gradually go down, it crashes over weeks, months or years. is that after 10 p.m. you can get that, okay, I've got a second wind and not being able to go back to sleep, which then makes it harder. So, you know, going to bed before 10 p.m. and starting some sort of unwind routine, like even if it's 3 minutes of meditation, whatever it might be, getting off your phone, that sort of thing. That's probably what I would be looking at working towards. But also, yeah, other reasons for, you know, having difficulty sleeping. Obviously, we're talking about HPA axis dysfunction today, but that can have.
And is that dysfunction related to, like, a lot of women I know might wake up to settle the baby or the child and then really struggle to get back to sleep? The brain starts ticking over. Yeah.
As well, and what can happen is there's something called this cortisol awakening response, which happens in the mornings. So what normally happens is that as we're starting to get towards our wake up time, obviously having regular wake up times like in the morning, your brain starts to send a message, okay, we need to ramp up some cortisol to get the day going, and that's what normally happens. But what can happen in within that 30 minutes of waking up, some women can have, or some people can have, a low response, which means that they find it incredibly hard to get out of bed. And so that what's happening is you're not producing enough cortisol to be able to get yourself going. So these are people that, you know, take 2 hours before they feel normal as far as their energy levels, that type of thing. And they just, you know, they literally have to drag themselves out of bed. But then the alternative can happen as well, where they have excessive, like a high CAR response, which is where, you know, they're feeling anxious and they're feeling, you know, and this is to do with the anticipation of stress. So it's like your brain's going, all right, she's going to be running on like headless chook for the next hour, so we just need to really ramp this up, sort of thing. But then they can wake up feeling anxious and all this sort of stuff. So that can be part of it as well. So obviously the different things that can contribute to not getting enough sleep. But yeah, so whether waking through the night or in the morning, that can be an interesting pattern to observe as well. So
yeah, all such good points. And I mean, I guess at some stage all of us have gone through this. So to anyone out there who is struggling with, you know, lack of sleep, anxiety, all of that, there is definitely help out there. And Georgia and I have also touched on before postnatal depletion, and the difference between postnatal depletion and depression. So I'll also link that below as well, because that's got some really important points in it as well.
The thing about this kind of thing is that just a lot of it is things that can be addressed. There's some things that are over your control, like having a baby that wakes up every 3 hours. Like that's not going to last forever, but it's a reality for some women now. But then there are things you can do to help support your body through that and to help improve where you're at, you know. So I'm not going to promise you're going to get 8 hours sleep a night, because I can't do much about your baby waking up every 3 hours. But
yeah, definitely
can help your body respond and to handle that stress better than it might be. So that's
absolutely. There's definitely support out there, you know, and there are things you can do from nutrition and movement and, as we said, meditation point of views that can, I mean, and as you say, that doesn't have to be this massive, you know, shift in lifestyle to make them happen. Small things can actually make a big difference. Yeah. Cool. Well, thanks so much, Georgia. That was very, very informative. And I'll make sure we post below as well where everyone can find you, because I know you're always a wealth of knowledge. So that was fabulous.
Thanks for having me.